Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a topic that can be really tough and sensitive, but also incredibly important for many people. What does the Bible actually say about divorce? It's a question that brings up a lot of emotions and has been debated for centuries. So let's explore this together with open hearts and a desire to understand. First, let's go back to the very beginning, to the book of Genesis. The Bible establishes marriage as a sacred covenant, a union designed by God. In Genesis 2:24, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." This one flesh concept is foundational. It speaks to a deep, profound unity, not just physical, but spiritual and emotional as well. This is God's ideal for marriage, a lifelong, unbreakable bond between one man and one woman. Jesus himself affirms this high view of marriage. In Matthew 19, when the Pharisees test him by asking about divorce, Jesus points them right back to Genesis. He says, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female and said, 'Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh.' So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate." Jesus' response is powerful. He emphasizes that the union of marriage is something God himself has created. The ideal is permanent. He sets a very high standard, reminding us that this isn't just a human contract. It's a divine institution. But then the Pharisees push back. They ask, why then did Moses command one to give a certificate of divorce and to send her away? This is a key part of the conversation. They're referring to a passage in Deuteronomy 24, which outlines a procedure for divorce. It seems like a contradiction, right? On one hand, God's ideal is permanence, but on the other, the law of Moses provides for divorce. Jesus' answer to this is incredibly insightful. He replies in Matthew 19:8, "Because of your hardness of heart, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so." This is a crucial distinction. Jesus is saying that the provision for divorce in the Old Testament wasn't God's perfect plan. It was a concession, a reluctant permission given because of human sinfulness and the hardness of heart. It was a way to manage a broken situation and provide some legal protection, particularly for the woman in a fallen world. It wasn't an endorsement of divorce, but a recognition of human failure. So Jesus brings the focus back to God's original design. But then he introduces an exception. In Matthew 19:9, he continues, "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another, commits adultery." This phrase, "except for sexual immorality," has been the subject of immense study and debate. The Greek word used here is porneia, which is a broad term. It can refer to various forms of sexual sin, including adultery, but it can also encompass premarital sex, incest, or other serious sexual misconduct. So in this specific case, Jesus seems to allow that when one partner has broken the one flesh covenant through serious sexual unfaithfulness, the innocent party is not necessarily bound to the marriage in the same way. The covenant has already been violated in a fundamental way. It's important to note, though, that this is presented as a permission, not a command. Even in cases of infidelity, reconciliation and forgiveness are still Christian ideals. Divorce is a last resort, not the first option. Now, let's turn to the Apostle Paul. He addresses marriage and divorce extensively in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 7. He's writing to a church in a culture where divorce was common, and he's answering specific questions from the believers there. First, Paul reaffirms Jesus' teaching for Christian couples. In verses 10 and 11, he writes, "To the married I give this charge, not I, but the Lord. The wife should not separate from her husband. But if she does, she should remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband. And the husband should not divorce his wife." Here Paul is clear. Christian couples should not initiate divorce. He echoes the ideal of permanence. He even adds that if a separation does occur, the goal should be reconciliation or remaining single, not immediately remarrying. But then Paul addresses a different situation, one Jesus didn't explicitly cover, a marriage between a believer and an unbeliever. This was a common reality in the early church as people came to faith. What if one spouse becomes a Christian and the other doesn't? Paul gives this instruction in verses 12 and 13. If any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever, and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. The believer's responsibility is to try to preserve the marriage. Their faith brings a sanctifying presence into the home. However, Paul then introduces another exception, often called the Pauline privilege. He says in verse 15, "But if the unbelieving partner separates, let it be so. In such cases, the brother or sister is not enslaved. God has called you to peace." This addresses the scenario where the unbelieving spouse is the one who insists on leaving. If the unbeliever deserts the believer because of their faith, the believer is not enslaved, meaning they are free from the marital bond and, most scholars believe, free to remarry. The key here is abandonment by the non-believing partner. So to recap, the Bible presents a very high view of marriage as a lifelong, divine covenant. The primary ideal is permanence. Jesus points to hardness of heart as the reason divorce was ever permitted. He allows an exception in the case of sexual immorality, porneia. Paul reinforces the call for permanence among believers and adds another exception for cases where an unbelieving spouse abandons a believing spouse. It's also crucial to remember the context. The Bible consistently speaks out against injustice and oppression. While not explicitly listed as grounds for divorce in these key passages, many theologians and pastors believe that situations involving abuse, whether physical, emotional, or otherwise, represent a severe form of abandonment and a destruction of the marriage covenant. Such actions are a profound violation of the one flesh principle and the call to love and cherish one's spouse. In these tragic situations, protecting the safety and well-being of the abused person is paramount. If you or someone you know is in an abusive situation, please seek help immediately. There are resources available and your safety is the number one priority. So what's the takeaway? The Bible's message on divorce is nuanced. It holds up a beautiful and high ideal for marriage, while also providing realistic and compassionate guidance for living in a fallen world where covenants are broken and hearts are hardened. It's not a simple list of rules, but a framework that calls us toward faithfulness, grace, forgiveness, and, when necessary, provides a path forward in difficult circumstances. This topic is deeply personal and can be painful. If this is something you're walking through, please know that God's grace is immense. He is a God of redemption and healing. Seek wise counsel from trusted pastors or Christian counselors. Surround yourself with a supportive community. You are not alone. Thanks so much for watching and engaging with this important topic. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more discussions like this. Let me know your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. See you in the next video.